So our next speaker is a very seasoned professional in terms of technology and cybersecurity, worked with some absolutely gigantic brands in the market like Citibank and JP Morgan. I mean, his list of accreditations would eat up the rest of the time he's got left if I was to read through them. So Amit, if you're online, thank you very much. I know you're running on a very short timeline. You're discussing what security expectations are in the APAC region, correct?
Yeah, critical infrastructure. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Charmaine and the Privacec team to put up this session. It's wonderful to put together such session, bring together the industry people and talk on various topics. So people who join this session can benefit and understand the various aspects, not one aspect. I'm covering the critical infrastructure, and I think so I have given one slide which 5 topic, and I have 20 minutes, which is very, very less to cover critical infrastructure. But I think so what I will do quickly, I'll just quickly touch base on some of the key items which I think is important for people to know. The first and foremost, what I would like people to understand what actually critical infrastructure means. This is a very, very commonly used word right now. People are saying the critical infrastructure must be protected. There's a high cybersecurity risk on the critical infrastructure, and for that, it's very important to understand when somebody say the critical infrastructure, what it means. From my perspective and as a professional, what I see, critical infrastructure is something which can impact your community, your economy, safety, and well-being of the humans. So anything that touches all this area, you can consider as a critical. And that's where you need to start thinking about how you build the security around these areas to ensure it do not impact our community, our economy, safety of human being and others. What is fundamentally changing right now? I think so one of the biggest changes happening in this entire space is basically we are moving to a connected digital world. So when we are moving to a connected digital world, we have the critical application, we have the critical processes in the critical infrastructure space, which is we generally call the operational technology, and they operate in conjunction with the industrial control system, right? So these components in the back end build the critical infrastructure system organization, I would say. And that's where we have to put an emphasis to protect all of them. So if you really understand a critical infrastructure, what it means, what I just explained, you can think about it. If something goes wrong from the cybersecurity or any other point of view, what could be the impact of that particular hack or that particular attack on any of the organization and impact to the end user, which is possibly your community and economy. So with that, if I can go to the next one, what is the complexity and challenges we are facing right now? The biggest complexity and challenges what we are facing right now, we need to look from the historical point of view. Historically, the OT organization and the ICS or industrial control organization, they were operating as an independent, siloed organization and very well connected with the IT organization. Because the reason for that, because the way they have been configured, the application and the software which has been deployed in the past, they were using a lot of native proprietary systems or protocols and other stuff. And for that reason, they have to work in a way that they should operate independent from the normal IT corporate environment. And why it has been done in that way, because it is so critical and it is so important for your economy and for other reason. You need to create a air gap environment where nobody can have access to that. There's a very commonly used word if you're talking to any critical infrastructure professional or a cyber professional who's supporting critical infrastructure. They very commonly use a word called air gap. When we use the air gap, what we say, this specific system which supports this environment is basically air gapped in a way that nobody can have access to that. However, while it's good to have the air gapping done around these systems, you of course always have an opportunity to exploit one or the other way of these systems. I can give in a very small example. Most of these systems are air gap, but actually they have a console or they have a machine or they have a computer side, which actually which is actually used by these operators to run day in, day out function. If that system is basically connected with the internet, while you have air gapped everything, there's an avenue for anyone to connect to those system or hacker, and then they can use that transit path to actually attack on your air gap system, which is so-called air gap. So while we say this air gap, but there's a possibility or there's a risk associated with it. What is changing right now with this new shift in the way the organizations are moving towards the digital world, digitally connected world and all? There's a huge IT and OT convergence is taking place. While you are still running the possibly the similar OT environment, but you have a huge reliance on IT system, because you need some kind of a connectivity between the ICT and OT to ensure you can function it properly. And with that convergence, your risk is increasing, right? So this is the complexity and challenges which I just wanted to explain to you. While people think that OT is, while it's a independent, standalone, very air gap kind of system, but what the shift of, because of the digital world shift, we are now started seeing that they're coming closer and closer, and that's what the new challenges will be, that how you're going to manage your OT system risk associated when you have a linkage between IT and OT. So if I go to the next topic, which is possibly we can see, I have been often asked by a lot of people that what are the standards and practices we should be implying for the OT security or the critical infrastructure security. First of all, I would say if there's a myth that there's a specific special standard for the critical infrastructure now, if there's a myth that what do we have to have a very different kind of cyber control, I would say no. First of all, we have to always understand all this system, either it's a OT system, it's a ICS system, or it's a IT system, whatever the system we are actually using it, at the end of the day, they're still operating with the basic fundamental of the computer system or IT system, and they still have the basic control. So you talk about access management, vulnerability management, you talk about the backup and restore, and any other stuff, that all applies to them. Possibly the way it is applied is different, but they still apply to those systems. So I have generally been asked as a risk professional that what is the standard we should follow to uplift the security. I think the previous speaker from Privasec is talking about ISO 27000. That can be applied as well, because those are the set of controls that you can apply on that. But there are certain specific I would say framework or standards which definitely has been written and is available in the market, which specifically talks about that you can actually use that to build your OT or ICS infrastructure security. One of them is ISO 62443, which is very commonly used in the ICS world. This is again very close to ISO 27001 kind of thing. But in ISO 62443, that there's a lot of focus on addressing the vulnerability and addressing the availability risk, because in the critical infrastructure world, availability risk is also one of the top risks if you compare to the cyber risk. So while we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, in ICT world, you more talk about confidentiality and integrity as a priority. But in OT world, availability is also the very big priority, because if something goes wrong, it can impact a lot of people. So that's one of the standard 62443. And the next one is, of course, the NIST standard 882. I would say that a lot of people try to map every control of the NIST and thinking about that it will directly apply to that. There's a big bunch of controls there. You just need to ensure that what is your requirement and what you want to apply, because the way the NIST has been written is specific. It's not very specific to any particular system or any data. That's written a very generic, and you have to pick and choose to ensure it applies for your requirement and your organization security. There's another one which quite been used in the US, is called North American Reliability Corporation Critical Infrastructure Protection. So this is again in United States, this has been applied across, but then when you apply this, it come back with a combination of 62443 and the NIST. And there's another one which is very commonly used, and Asia Pacific has started using this a lot, and they're slowly starting adopting this particular standard. Is called C2M2. This is the cybersecurity capability maturity model. So this is the US name, ESC2M2, but like in Australia, we are calling AESCSF. It's exactly same standard with some additional domains in that. But this is specific standards, or this specific framework has been designed mostly for the energy sector. When we say energy, it includes the gas and electricity. But the adoption of this specific framework is increasing in Asia Pacific. Even Australia has adopted that, and the expectation from the regulators are that you should be trying to comply with this requirement requirement over the period of time. It's not mandatory, it's not a law, but this is what is happening. We'll go to the next key item, which is on the threat vector. It's very important for all of us to understand what is the various threat vector which can impact your overall critical infrastructure security. The topmost, I think, so we all at this point in time know is a lot of geopolitical, a nation state risk. Because if you are an interconnected world, if you have already converged your OT into IT, and there's a relationship, there's always an avenue for someone who is sitting so far, but they can still exploit your security. So the biggest threat factor I would see at this point in time is because of the geopolitical situation, the nation state threats are increasing. The second biggest risk in this in critical infrastructure piece, while it's quite tight in general, but your insider risk, because if you have a staff which is, while you don't give access to a lot of people from outside, but you have a staff which is sitting inside, and the person has he or she has the excessive privileges, that person can be used as a launch pad to target your environment. There's another insider factor which we generally don't consider as insider, but I consider as insider third party, because once you have a third party engagement, they are basically leveraging your process, leveraging your network to provide you a support. So I consider as insider is because if they are compromised, they're basically sitting and supporting us. At the end of the day, they might be able to they might get compromised, and then hence poses a risk to your organization. The third biggest group which I can say is the hacktivists, right? Nowadays, you have seen recently there's a lot of DDoS attack happening in the New Zealand and other places. They sit somewhere, they just decide to attack a specific organization, or is decided to attack some group of organization just to create that level of discomfort that you're not 100% foolproof safe. You're also vulnerable, and we just want to show you. They don't have possibly any immediate bad intention, but just want to show you that it's not that you're foolproof, and we can launch an attack from anywhere on you as well. The other challenges, of course, which I'm seeing is people awareness. So we always say people are the weakest link. So we need to ensure that we should focus on when we are talking about the critical infrastructure, because the understanding the way the systems are designed and configured, the understanding about overall environment is very important, and then associated risk should be made aware to the people who is supporting that, and people should understand that in case you have been in a situation, what you need to do. So people awareness in that entire environment is very, very important. One of the bigger challenge which I definitely see is, do you really know what all you are running, right? Sometimes you really don't have the full visibility end to end, because you are running very small component to a very big machine, example as a boiler. So it's very important to know each and every asset which is in your environment, to ensure that you have a right inventory, and you can put the right controls around that. And another one which I see is the maintaining day in day out this environment, because these environments are so air gapped and tight. Sometime when you are maintaining it, you might find a loophole. You might not think that it's a gap, but eventually it's a gap, because you really don't think from the security mindset perspective. So these are the few challenges which I definitely see in what's happening in the critical infrastructure space. My next, the last one, because I have only 6 minutes, I just want to touch base on what's happening across Asia Pacific. So, of course, in Australia, we have the Critical Infrastructure Act, which has been introduced in 2017, and then over the period of time, it has some modification and some updates, and it's been implemented in 2018. But recently, the government has issued a consultation paper in Australia, and asking feedback with the people and across the organization, people and various bodies, that what it should be looking like, and they're looking to formalize a new critical infrastructure. Possibly a documentation in next 6 to 12 months. But then, and why this is happening, because the risk on critical infrastructures are keep increasing, and people are really not sure, is this right? Is this enough that I have done that? Do I need to do more? And that's why government is keep updating on that. In China, they have they have a cybersecurity. Sorry, just let me just read it out. So in China, the critical infrastructure is linked with the China cybersecurity law, which has been published in 2017. But they have another guideline for the critical infrastructure. So you need to, whenever you are looking at China, you need to read the China cyber law in conjunction with the critical infrastructure critical infrastructure guideline. And also there's an adoption of 62443 in the NIST there. In India, what they have is the Information Technology Act of 2000, which has been further used to regulate the critical infrastructure organization, and they have issued a national critical information infrastructure guideline, which has been in 2014. This is again linking back that how you should protect your critical infrastructure organization and what controls and what other thing you can implement. In more, I can say is that there's a Cybersecurity Act of 2018. And then it also asks you to comply with the code and companies and associated framework, which I just explained, 62443, 80, 802, 3730. So again, most of these countries are actually having a law which actually bind you to protect your critical infrastructure organization, and they provide you a set of guidance that how you should be protecting it, and then you can use that law or standard to connect with your framework and then start using the 62443, ISO 27001 NIST framework, C2M2 and all others all together to ensure that you assess what is your environment look like and what control you need to implement. So some organization might have a very, very robust vulnerability management control because they're operating the environment which is very vulnerable. Other organization may not have that level of vulnerability related problem. They might have some, so they need to adopt a different approach. Your access management could be different in one organization. Access management could be different for the another organization. If you have a resiliency framework built in, then possibly your resiliency approach will be very different compared to another organization. But you have to look at every aspect of the framework which is available there, every controls and every objective which is associated with those controls, and then determine what your security and the resiliency framework or the resiliency requirement will look like for the OT environment. So I will stop here. I covered quite fast, sorry about that, but I just given 20 minutes. So I'll stop here. I will be able to take one or two quick questions.
Thank you very much, Amit. I'm just going to pick one of the questions that we've got. So it's an anonymous one, but the asking when the last time was that you detected a breach and what was involved with that breach from both the GRC side and the incident response side. And maybe you can shed some light on what the key lessons were learned from that that our audience can take away.
So I think it's difficult to answer in 1 minute, and of course, this is a kind of a confidential information that we generally don't share. But I would say, in general, any breach, you are hearing a lot of breach for across of organization. It happens recently in multiple countries. But then I think so the lesson learned, every time you go back and try to find out, you find some very, very basic control which was not operating. And while we have implemented all the advanced control, but the basic control was missing, and somebody have exploited that basic control. Like example, they just want a one email ID and password, right? And they try to fish 50 odd users, they get one ID and password, and that's good enough for them because that's a start. So I think so it's very important to implement the very, very basic control which people only talk about vulnerability and access management methods, and that will help to reduce the risk.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was very insightful.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Shimon, for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you, sir.